Everyone, welcome back to the next video. In this video I will show you how to display a simple 3D cube inside your native Android application, and here I will be using the Godot game engine for this, but we will be creating a native Android project. Firstly I will tell you what it is. What is Godot? It is a game engine, and with the help of this you can create 2D and 3D games, and these games can be embedded inside your native Android application as well. So if you are trying to follow what I am doing, it's better you download this game engine. It is free and open source, and it has a lot of great people around it, so it won't suddenly disappear, so you don't have to worry about it. Similarly, it is from what I feel, it is much easier to do 3D stuff with Godot game engine on Android. Now the other library which Google has open source is called Filament. This is also a 3D physical real-time physical rendering engine, but it is so difficult. In this tutorial I am just trying to add a simple 3D cube, and I am not an expert in 3D. So for a beginner like me, it is so difficult to just add a simple 3D cube. So I will show you the code in case if you want to play around with Filament as well. Just go to Android, go to samples, and check this. They have this lit cube demo, sample lit cube. Go to Java main activity, and if you see, this is fine, this all is fine. The problem which I have is setting up scene is fine. The mesh part, like how on earth am I supposed to understand all these numbers if I'm not from 3D background? Like I wish just like Threejs have simple primitives like creating a cube, creating a torus, those kind of, creating a sphere. I wish they had provided something like that. I mean, they do have it, but still on top of that we have to create this vertex indices and vertex buffer. I don't really understand all these terms, so this is very difficult for as a beginner like me to understand all these terms. That's why I'm using Godot game engine. Now there is something called scene view or scene form as well, an Android library which is mostly used for rendering 3D stuff in augmented reality. It can also render 3D stuff as well, but internally it uses Filament, and I found it very restrictive. Like suppose if I'm trying to do a simple game, like a moderate game, I found it very cumbersome, like the scene view thing. If you're doing augmented reality stuff, then scene view might be a great choice for that, but I think Godot also has some Godot XR, I guess, but I'm not sure if it works on Android or not. So just for 3D stuff I'm using Godot game engine specifically for Android. Now I'm embedding my Godot 3D stuff inside this native Android application which I have created. Now some of you who have experience with Godot might be knowing that we can create a Godot project and then export to Android as well. Yes, we can do that as well, but here this tutorial is basically mostly for Android developers who aren't much familiar with Godot but are familiar with the native Android ecosystem. That's why I'm using Godot game engine. But if you want to use something else, you can do that. Now let's get started. Like I have wasted enough time, so I will be following this documentation. So embedding Godot in existing Android app. So for that I have created this cheat sheet as well, so that I can quickly show you what all things we have to do instead of me reading the documentation. So I have created a native Android application, and I am using XML layouts, but if you want you can use Jetpack Compose as well. Next, let's follow the docs. So firstly we have to write this line of code inside our Android manifest. Now some of you might know that screen orientation has been deprecated, but this Android SDK hasn't provided any alternative to this. Like they are saying that your app should work in both portrait and landscape mode, but I don't want to do that. If I don't write this code, then the Godot part will not work. That's why we have to write this code. So I'll go to Android manifest, and I will just add this bit of code to my activity. Okay, here you can see it is deprecated. If you don't want that, you can just add this tools ignore discouraged API and it will go away, but again that's not a good practice. But anyways, it is what it is. I don't think it would make a big deal. Next we'll have to copy this. Now at the time of me recording this video, godot 4.2.2 is available. That's what I am using. So whatever godot version you are using, you have to use the same version over here as well. So here it is 4.2.0, ignore that. But here if I go to build.gradle.kts, we have to add godot 4.2.2. I think by the time you watch it, godot 4.2.3 might be out, so make sure you use that version. Now here it is showing a warning because it is telling use the version catalog, so you can just do an option enter and just click on replace with new lib. So what it basically does is that if you go to libs.versions.toml, it has separated our godot version over here and our module name over here. That's what it has done. And then just click on sync now. Okay, then we have to add this bit of code. Now in the godot documentation they have given something apt, I guess apt resources, but apt option, sorry, and that is deprecated. We have to use android resources. So I'll just copy this and I'll go to build.gradle.kts, and here inside default config I will just add this. Okay, so then again I'll click on sync now. Then we have to use frame layout. So I'll just copy this, and I want my entire activity to occupy the entire the 3D scene should occupy the entire screen. That's why what I'll do is I'll just use frame layout over here, and this should be 0 dp so that it occupies entire width and height. This should be 0 dp. Frame layout does not have text, so I'll remove this. So here you can see we are constraining to each side. Now we need to provide one id to our frame layout, so I'll just copy this id. For now you make sure you use the same thing because we need to reference this id inside our code as well, but I'll tell you where exactly. Ignore all this code. So next we have to create our, we have to firstly extend godot host. So I'll show you my imports as well. I'll copy, then I'll just import it. So this is the import. Ignore this error for now. Firstly we'll copy this godot fragment, so the frame layout which we have, that's what we are doing over here. So godot fragment internally uses frame layout. Okay, and then we will initialize it something like this. So I'll just copy this and I'll paste it over here. Ignore the IntelliSense part. Sometimes my Android, I'm using one plugin, so here you can see it is giving C is IntelliSense. I don't really ignore this, like I'm not really using that. And then we have to copy these two methods, overriding of these two methods, because we are extending godot host. So I'll just copy this. Alright, then we don't need all this stuff. Then we have to create our godot project, right? So what I'll do is we'll just right click new folder, assets folder, click finish. So our entire godot project should be inside this assets folder. Now I will open our godot engine and we will create a simple project. So just new browse, go where your project is located. So my project is over here. Go to app, src, main, assets, select current folder. Okay, then don't click on this create folder. Okay, just keep it as it is. Don't give your project a name, even that is fine. If it is named as assets, that is fine. Just click on create and edit. Then I will just create one 3D scene, and here we have this node 2D, right? So I will just firstly we need to add one camera and environment as well. So I right click on this click on this three dots, add the sun to the scene. Okay, then add environment to the scene. Then we need a camera as well, so camera 3D. So select camera 3D, and I'll just move this camera. So here you see this blue arrow, right? So I'll just move this camera because our cube mesh will come at the center, so that the camera should see our mesh, otherwise it won't be visible in the output. And I'll also move the camera a little bit up. Okay, if you want to rotate it as well, you can do that. So here you can see you can just move it something like this. use whatever you feel like is appropriate. Okay, then I'll just do Control S, Command S or Control S, click on save. I'll select this node to 3D again, plus button. We have to search for mesh instance 3D, and here you have to select this box mesh, and here you can see this is our cube. Now suppose I want to rotate this cube as well, so we can attach one script to it. So just click on this plus button, make sure you have selected node 2D before clicking on this plus of your script, and here this name you can change to whatever you feel like. Then we need to get a reference of our mesh because that's what we want to rotate. So just drag and drop, but make sure you press Control or Command as well while dropping it. Okay, this is not working for me, just a second. Okay, just give me one. Okay, so finally it worked for me. So here you can see, even if you type it by hand, that's fine, but make sure whatever name you have over here, mesh instance 3D, same name should be over here as well, dollar mesh instance 3D. So we get a reference of it, and then I just want to rotate it around the Z axis. So rotate _Z, and I will just rotate it by 0.05. Make sure you run it once inside your Godot editor. So I'll just click on this run button, click on this select current, and here you can see it is working fine. Now to run it on your Android device, you don't have to do anything, just go to your Android project. If you see my assets folder, here is our Godot project automatically created. Then I'll just run it on my real device, use USB debugging. Don't run it on the emulator, it might work or may not work, because I think Godot uses Vulkan as the backend, so I'm not really sure if that is working properly on a emulator or not. So run it on a real Android device. Now this is the one way of doing things. If you are experienced with Godot, you might know that you can export this project using the Android template as well. So you just go to project, export, add Android, and you can export that way as well. But I think this tutorial is mostly for Android developers who already have a big existing project in Kotlin or Java and just want to integrate one screen in Godot. Okay, I think I missed a few things. So here you can see it is in so the cube rotates fine on my real device. The reason is that I'm mirroring my device using Wi-Fi debugging. That's why you might feel little bit of jank. But here is our 3D cube. Now suppose I don't want it in landscape, I can go to project settings. I will go to window, and here I will just make this width as 480, change it to whatever you feel like, and height as 1200. Okay, and orientation I will keep it as portrait, close, and I will run this. Now again, this might take little bit of time. Other important thing is, in case if there is any issue, debugging on the Android part might become a little difficult, because you have to look into logcat, and sometimes the error message are not proper. But same can be said about while if you just created an Android project and you are exporting it to so you have created a Godot project and exporting it to Android, even that time debugging is little difficult. So that is the disadvantage of using a game engine. I would say if you are a native Android developer, debugging can be little tricky, but if you are comfortable to use filament, go ahead with it. That's what I'll say. But this is very difficult, like how am I supposed to know all this stuff? So suppose here I can see my cube, right? But what if I want to quickly change my mesh to, I don't like this cube, I want a suppose this, I don't know, capsule mesh, I guess. All I have to do was just change it inside the drop down and run it. But if you are using filament, you have to do all these calculations. Like I have tried using ChatGPT as well for this, ChatGPT 4.0 version, even that is not really good at this. It gives a lot of error and it gets confused between filament and what I have noticed is that there are a lot of good documentation and resources for Godot, not on Android specific but in general for Godot game engine, but there is very less documentation for filament Android, very less tutorials. So yeah, so here you can see I can see my cube as well, so that's how easy it is. Anyways, that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.